directors. Directors have received the agenda materials in advance of this meeting and are free to ask questions or comment at any time on the action items submitted for approval today. Please note, however, questions or comments from the audience will not be admitted to this meeting, as usual. Before hearing the items for board approval today, I will turn the floor over to President and CEO Madeline Mills to welcome our newest member of the board and introduce today's board presentation.
He's not coming. We have a
So in absentia.
But exactly. Before we get started, he had called me and said I had a previous appointment before I was appointed to the board that I can't miss, and I said we have a quorum. It's fine. This time, it's fine. But I would like to acknowledge and welcome him to the board. It's recently appointed by the mayor, Carl Weisbrod. With over 40 years of experience in public service and urban development, Carl's distinguished career is a testament to his commitment to building equitable, resilient, and economically vibrant communities. Carl is a national authority in city planning, urban development, and public-private real estate development, and his 4 decades of experience. Carl has brokered and led complex public-private partnerships and created innovative governance strategies to spur economic development. And if you recall, he also led our Pier 40 task force back in 2011 and 12. Carl has served the City of New York in many capacities, and most recently as chairman of the New York City Planning Commission and director of the New York City Department of City Planning. Prior to these appointments, Carl was president of Trinity Wall Street, where he managed the successful rezoning of the Hudson Square area of Manhattan, which transformed the neighborhood into a dynamic hub for creative industries and new housing, including up to 700 affordable units. Carl has now returned to HRPT as a senior advisor and holds a position as chairman for the Trust for Governors Island. In addition to serving as a board member for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, Carl is also a senior fellow at the Marin Institute of Urban. I'm missing a word. We are pleased to welcome Carl to the board of Hudson River Park Trust.
Excellent. You'll be a great addition.
He knows us well.
Yeah.
Our first official item on the agenda is a presentation by Adam Weinberg, the Alice Pratt Brown Director of the Whitney Museum of American Art. Adam will share with the board a presentation on the proposed art installation project Days End by artist David Hammonds in Hudson River Park on the south part of the Gansevoort Peninsula. Adam?
Thank you, Madeline. Thank you all for having me here today. Like any self-respecting art historian, I always have too many pictures and too much to say. So I will move. I know I have a very short time, so I will move very quickly. But in my haste, if I'm skipping things or the things that you want to know, please don't hesitate to slow me down because I'm going faster than I normally am. So just going to start here. It starts with the whole history of the Whitney Museum, but just simply to say that the Whitney Museum started downtown in Greenwich Village back at the 1916, 1918 period, and the first museum opened in 1931. So the Whitney Museum started as the Artist Museum. Richard Vanderbilt Whitney was an artist and not a collector, unlike most of the museums. I mean, she did collect, but she was primarily an artist first. And because of that, the Whitney has always felt most connected to the idea of making of artwork and not simply the collecting of artwork. And in a way, the championing of this project with David Hammonds has to do with championing the work of a great living artists. So here's the Whitney over here. I think most of you know. But I think one of the things that we are particularly proud of this building that opened 2.5 years ago is the sense that it looks out into the world and that people look into the Whitney. The old Royer building was a fantastic building, but much more like a bunker. The idea that we're connected to the waterfront, to the Hudson River, to the neighborhood, to Greenwich Village is really so much a part of the ethos of the Whitney and its connection to the community. This is a sketch that was given to us by an artist named David Hammonds. David is 74 years old, has been living in New York City for 40 years now. I think really thinks of himself as a New Yorker, even though he is in LA. And he came to visit the museum while we were under construction. David is Julie, and I'll talk a little bit about in a second, is really one of the great living artists today, and an artist who has done a few things publicly, but not many. And I was pointing out the window of the museum while we were under construction, was telling him that there was a wonderful pier shed opposite the museum that had been made into an artwork by the artist Gordon Motta Clark. And David is very quizzical. He didn't say much, and about 4 days later, this sketch appeared on my desk, and I didn't know whether it was a gift for taking him on a tour or exactly what it was. But it actually was a proposal of sorts, which was not something we were requesting. In fact, we were hoping you'd do an exhibition inside the museum. This is the second pier shed that was on the site, where the artist Gordon Motta Clark, who lived on Gansevoort Street for many years, this existing warehouse, he went, and Gordon Motta Clark was trained as an architect at Cornell. His father was a famous surrealist artist named Motta. He was known for cutting up buildings and turning architecture into sculpture. And this was a disused building. He went into the building, he cut up the building, he turned it into kind of a contemporary cathedral of light and air and water. And this existed for several years. It wasn't legal. In fact, he did move to France because he was worried about the fact that it was a bit illegal. But this became a huge gathering place in the gay community along the Hudson River waterfront, and is considered one of the, it was made at the same time that Robert Smithson made his famous spiral jetty. This is considered like an earthwork at the same time, where artists were working big out in the land for artworks that you couldn't own. So David, who Hammonds, knew of this piece. He was living in New York. He had been vaguely acquainted with Gordon Motta Clark, had this idea of making a kind of homage to the original pier shed as well as to what Gordon had done. This is a picture of David Hammonds, who, as I said, has been living up in Harlem. He has gotten the MacArthur Genius Award. He's gotten Guggenheim Awards. He's in the collection of every major museum. He's an artist that everybody would love to do a retrospective of, but because he's an artist who was never paid attention to for most of his career, he is not actually acquiesced in participating very directly within the museum world of things. These are some of the pieces of his very quickly. This piece called The America the Beautiful is currently in an exhibition at the Tate Gallery called Soul of a Nation, which will be coming to the Brooklyn Museum. Don't miss it. It's a spectacular show about the history of African-American art in the 1960s and 70s. This piece, How You Like Me Now, was included in a retrospective organized by Tom Finkelpearl when Tom was at PS1, and it was the one and only retrospective that has ever been held of his work. And this piece was in the opening of the Whitney Museum. I could give you a half-hour talk on each of these pieces. If you want to catch me another time, I will, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the range of his work. He's also particularly known for the piece that he did on the left, which was called Blizzard Ball Sail. This is a piece that he did in front of Cooper Union. It's actually a very famous kind of conceptual work where he sold snowballs. And believe it or not, every snowball was sold. And one of the snowballs was claimed to still be in somebody's freezer until recently. This piece called Higher Goals was commissioned by the Public Art Fund, as you can see, in 1986. It was actually also considered a major public piece where he made these very, very large basketball hoops, which were encrusted with bottle caps. This piece no longer extant, but is considered a major piece of public art. This is the only piece, and it's really kind of that exists, and actually it just sold. There's several versions of this American flag. This is the one hanging in front of the Studio Museum in our home. It just sold for over $1 million last week. He does not sell many works because he actually is not. He's interested in making the money from the work, but not having a real presence in the market itself. Just very quickly, because the importance of this piece is David's idea is to do an homage to the original pier shed, which you can see on the left, in the North German Lloyd Pier in 1901, the Gordon Motta Clark Pier, and his idea is to make a ghost monument in a way. The idea is to give you a memory, a sense of loss, a sense of what was at the waterfront. The idea is it has to be the exact same size, the exact location, out of the thinnest possible materials that can be made. So the idea is that it would disappear completely, and you'll see later on some of the images, in different kinds of weather. The idea is it's really a meditation on what was at the waterfront and is no longer at the waterfront. So this shows you over here. Here's the site of it. The Whitney is over here. This was the pier. The pier is not there anymore. This is it today. This is only half of this building is remaining, the rest are gone, so that's on Gainesville Peninsula. This is what the piece would look like. It would actually appear, I think, even thinner than that, because we're still getting the colors and the qualities of the material itself. And you'll see a plan of it, so you get a sense it's something. And I think that's very important to say is that this piece would in no way impinge upon any uses of Gainesville Peninsula itself. In other words, this is something that's just on the edge of the peninsula. It allows access to the water, baseball fields, parks, and everything. And that's why, in many ways, this felt like a great gift. Here's one of the greatest artists in America, does not have a public piece, has been one of the great artists of New York. We did not go to him for commission. In fact, it's the last thing we needed. And one of the challenges for me has been, this is a piece that the Whitney will not own. It will be on Hudson River Park Trust land. And to try to convince my board that this should be a priority for the institution and we shouldn't be spending this amount of money to buy an artwork to go in the museum is a bit of a challenge. But I believe that this is a piece that actually has a presence and an importance for the city, for the public sphere, for David Hammons, that actually supersedes the museum itself. And at best, the museum is a public trust and about giving back to the community. And just to give you a sense, as part of this, we've been working already with the community. We've started doing oral histories. We're doing the beginning of a documentary. There's incredible amount of history right at that site. We've done a lot of digging about the Native American community there, about the gay community. One of the things I always find most fascinating is here you have Herman Melville. It was called Fort Gansevoort. Fort Gansevoort was Herman Melville's maternal grandfather. And by chance, 40 years later, he becomes the custom inspectors for 19 years. Basically broke at that time and finishing Billy Budd and living in Chelsea. One of the weird connections that happens here. So these are all the different kinds of things that happen here. And as part of that, we're working with the community on developing interpretive materials and programs. Whitney has been very engaged with the community. Even before we moved in, we opened 2.5 years ago. We started a community program over 5 years ago. We have what we call Whitney Education Community Advisory Network that is made up with 12 members of our community groups that we work with on an ongoing basis. This just shows you, for example, the kind of mobile app that we're hoping to develop so that there would be signage that we would work with the Hudson River Park Trust, and we've been working very closely with Madeline and Noreen, who have been fantastic during this whole process. Thank you both very much, but putting a huge amount of time and effort in it. But it's wonderful because the idea is that you would be able to have something and be able to see the history, to be able to hear the history, to understand what happened in this site and the waterfront itself. And just also to give you a sense of the context, here's the Whitney Museum, here's Gansevoort Pier, the piece would be over here. Gordon Motta Clark lived and worked on the street. All of the artists in yellow, which you probably can't read from there, but some of the greatest artists in America lived and worked in this neighborhood. I mean, everybody from Diane Arbus to Marcel Duchamp, to Stuart Davis, to Isabel Bishop, to Roy Lichtenstein. And the pink ones are artists who are living and working in this neighborhood today. And that's why I started with the idea of an image of the artist and the idea of the working artist, because this is still very much about an artist neighborhood. And the ones in pink, all artists living and working there today, they're not all in Williamsburg, they're not all in Bushwick as much as we'd like to think they are. I just also wanted to point out that we've been fortunate enough, and it's been a real joy to be able to collaborate. We have done projects along the Hudson River Park, most in collaboration with Madeline and the Trust over the years. We did this actually great Robert Smithson floating barge where the island was pulled around New York City with the Kusama, which there it was outside. Now people are lining up for 3 hours to go into the David Swarner Gallery to see Kusama's work, and you could have seen it right here in the Hudson River Park. And just to give you a few more images of the piece, because I see that at time. I'm happy to have a buzzer here. What's that? No, I wasn't looking at you. I was looking at the clock.
Oh, it's like I didn't look at my
Usually
watch.
my staff usually does this. Oh, you want me to keep going? I back up and do it again. But I just wanted to give you, this actually really, I think, gives you a sense. The idea is, like Alexander Calder's work in a sense, it's a drawing in space. And the idea is, and you can see, it would change as the weather changes. It would not be lit at night, so there would not be light pollution. It will create no shadow. There's no platform over the water, so that in any way it's going to affect fish or plant life. We're looking at the idea of putting oyster wraps, for example, on where it is anchored into the water itself. But the idea is that this is a piece that would disappear and change in weather conditions. It's something that you would see and not see at the same time. And I think that's a lot about what David Hammond's work is. It is about loss. It's about disappearance. It's about the unknown histories or the neglected histories that happened in the world today. And I think, to me, that's what's one of the most moving parts of this. The Whitney is part of, in a way, as all new buildings are in New York, are part of the gentrification process. I like to think that what we bring to the community is really important and really matters. But what I love about this piece, this is an acknowledgement of what is gone, what has disappeared, but in a way can continue to exist. So I'll leave it at that in case you have any questions. I think it might 10 minutes plus.
How long is it contemplated that it be there?
It would be a permanent piece, and it would be a piece that we will raise the money to construct, and we would be in charge of taking care of, and we would have an agreement with the park. We would be in charge of the maintenance and the care of that.
What's it made of?
It would be a kind of stainless steel, and it would be brushed, so it would not be a shiny surface, so it's like a brushed steel so that it actually disappears. And the idea is to make it as thin as you possibly can, so the thickness of it, I think, is imagined to be about 8 inches. So that's why that actually is deceptive, because an 8-inch seen at that distance actually would almost disappear.
And they've done the engineering on it?
The engineering, yes, we've been working with Guy Nordenson, who has been working on this from the very beginning with us. And it's been, he's terrific. He was the engineer for the Museum of Modern Art building, but works with a lot of artists, as you know. I have to say, too, one of the things that's been very rewarding to me is that the community board, which we went to and gave its unanimous enthusiasm for it, in a way, the community gets it even more than even some of my board do. And I'm saying this very frankly because I think they see this as an affirmation of what was there, in a way. And my board, they admire the work. They think it's a terrific idea. They say, go for it and do it if you think this is right. But it's the community, really, that has actually, and I think it's because also, too, we didn't go out and say, pick an artist, decide that we wanted to do something here. This is a piece that very much came to us in a way. It's kind of given from the artist.
Did you say that you're contemplating attaching oyster?
Well, what do they call those?
Well, we haven't really had a good talk about
We
this.
hadn't talked about it, but
We are attaching oyster wraps to sites around the park, but we haven't really gotten into it.
Right, but it was something that was asked at the community board, and it said that we said that we'd be happy to contemplate, and Madeline had said the same thing about other peers.
We've wrapped, over the summer, we've tried some new oyster wraps on the pile field at Pier 32.
So the oyster wraps are different from oyster recovery stations?
Oyster recovery stations?
It's a,
Like the Million Oyster Project.
Yeah, yes.
Sorry, oysters.
Oh, we have the
Definitely
largest
wanted
amount
to
of
open a kettle of
oyster
fish,
recovery
literally,
stations
or
in
a kettle
the
of
park.
mollusks.
But this is different. These are wraps that have been approved by our permitting agencies. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the larger point, in the sense that I wanted to make, is the Whitney is one of the first LEED Gold museums in the United States. It's something we have a green roof. We've had honeybees for actually uptown, and we have them downtown. That presence and that sense of environmentally sound design applies to everything that we think about. So the attempt would be to kind of go that direction.
Do we have
Questions?
to do anything other than say, we noted at this point, or?
No, there's nothing to do it right now. I mean, there will actually not be anything to do other than when there is an agreement at some point between the Whitney, you'll see it, but it's going to be an agreement for a charitable contribution as well as a maintenance agreement. So it is likely that we may take this through the significant action process, just to make sure that everybody is, understands it thoroughly, although it has already gone through a couple of community board meetings, and actually it did not need a community board vote, but the community board did choose to vote on their support of it, which was unanimous. So it's obviously got a lot of good feeling around it.
So would it be helpful if we had a vote to support or not? Or
I just had a question. Who will own it?
It will be part of park property.
So we'll own it,
Yes.
but it'll come with a.
They'll come with me as your maintenance.
Adam is personally
I'm personally.
maintaining it.
That steel brushing technique that you
Exactly.
developed.
It doesn't like the oysters.
Yeah, it's very.
Anyway, thank you all very much. I'm sorry it was so quick, but
No,
I'm
Al, this is
happy to
great.
do it again,
Thank you.
anytime.
So much.
Thank you,
It's really
appreciate it.
exciting.
So this is the fastest I've ever heard Adam talk. I kept cutting down his presentation. And, but he is such an amazing presenter. I just want to say that, even though he did it very fast today, he's just, he makes the best presentations ever. So, and we're excited about this. I hope
We're having
you're
a
as
great time
excited
working.
as we are. And this will come back to you at the right time for you to consider the agreement between the Whitney and the trust.
Excellent. Any questions, comments?
No, I think you just have to be careful with files.
I'm sorry?
You know the files are gonna be a heartache.
Although it's a very,
All
very
our files
exciting,
are.
although it's a very, very exciting project and it looks gorgeous, I must tell you, I love the presentation. I would like a little time to mull over the fact of the area of the park that it will be taking up at a permanent installation, and I just think we ought to give it a little thought.
Okay. The, just so you understand that, well, these stanchions, they are 65 feet apart, and they're, Larissa, how wide are they again? The metal pieces.
8 inches.
They're only 8 inches. So they're incredibly slight. They don't get in the way of any plans for Gansevoort Peninsula. But you certainly have plenty of time to think about it.
Madeline, I think this is a great project. Being able to have a piece of his work in the park, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, I would take this piece at a heartbeat. Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks,
Yeah.
And I think it's really telling that the community board decided to vote on it and unanimous resolution in favor. So I think it's fantastic. But we should definitely look at it. Consider it. Okay, great. Thank you, Adam. All right,
Thank
so,
you.
Thank you all.
but you don't want to stay for this?
I'd love to. I am going to talk at the museum, so if any of you'd like to hear that.
And this concludes the fun part.
Yeah, exactly.
I really got to go.
That's it.
Okay, so the first item of business today is the approval of the minutes of the September 28, 2017 meeting of the Board of Directors. I'm sure everybody's read very carefully the minutes and ready questions or comments. Hearing none, I will call for a motion to approve the second. Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is a request for authorization to contract with Carrier Communications Corp. for the segment 4 security cameras and related installation services.
From art installations to security cameras.
Right?
The trust started utilizing cameras last year to enhance public safety and deter crime and support the protection of our park. Previously, the trust installed cameras in the Tribeca area, which was paid for by Councilmember Chin, and Pier 40. Those cameras are actively monitored by the trust park enforcement police, and they're used to record and document incidents that may occur. The next section of the park to be outfitted with cameras is Greenwich Village between Leroy and Pier 51. Accordingly, the trust seeks authorization from the board for the purchase and installation of 20 security cameras. In accordance with the trust procurement guidelines, the trust may utilize centralized contracts created through state or federal government. 2 forms of centralized contracting are available to the trust without the need for competitive procurement: New York State's OGS contracts and U.S. General Services Administration, GSA, for their information technology products contracts. Users of the centralized contracting system generally benefit from the buying power of the state or federal government as a single customer and through the reduction of administrative costs, taking advantage of discounts. The trust has purchased cameras through OGS before with carrier communications, and carriers' cameras and related services have proven to be reliable. The cost for the 20 cameras and related hardware accessories is estimated at $126,388.50, and the cost for the installation of the cameras is estimated at $103,860.04, together totaling approximately $230,248.54. I'm interested who estimates with 4 cents. That's very interesting to me.
That's a great message.
Councilmember Corey Johnson has allocated $174,000 in funding for the proposed project. The trust shall fund the balance of the project costs from its annual operating budget. The trust requests board authorization to contract with Carrier for the second floor security cameras and related installation services in an amount up to $250,000.
Questions, comments? So moved. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item before the board is a request for authorization to contract with Carrier Communications for park-wide security services. Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. The trust has identified a need for maintenance service contract for the security cameras to take effect upon the various expiration dates of the warranties provided by Carrier. The maintenance service contract will also cover the Pier 40 security cameras that are not under warranty. Once again, as explained earlier, the trust may utilize the centralized contract process to take advantage of the bulk discount for a maintenance service agreement. As stated before, the trust has purchased cameras and installation services in the past with OGS with Carrier. The trust shall fund the maintenance service contract from its annual operating budget. Accordingly, the trust now seeks board authorization to enter into a 3-year maintenance service contract with Carrier for park-wide security camera services. Carrier is the firm that provided and installed the camera system in Tribeca and is proposed to provide similar installation services in Greenwich Village. Just approved. The trust requests board authorization to contract with Carrier for park-wide security cameras for a 3-year service contract in the amount up to $74,000.
Thank you. Questions or comments? We have a motion to approve Carrier request. Second. In favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item before the board is a request for authorization to contract with User Rutledge Consulting Engineers for Pier 66A, emergency repair of crib beams and piles and related soil boring testing. Ms. Will.
Thank you. At its January 26, 2017 meeting, the Board of Directors approved a contract with Moffitt and Nickel for park-wide marine inspection services of the park's constructed piers, platforms, floating docks, and bulkheads to document their condition and to make recommendations for ongoing capital maintenance and repairs. The first phase of inspections was recently completed and revealed deteriorated timber structural piles and cross members at Pier 66A float bridge. Specifically, M&M issued an immediate action letter that recommended a restriction to access the north and south finger piers of Pier 66A, which we've done. M&M recommended limiting the float bridge to pedestrian loading until it could provide additional structure analysis. M&M also recommended that at a minimum, all missing elements in timber piles with advanced or severe deterioration be repaired on a priority basis within 6 to 12 months of the analysis report. In accordance with the trust procurement guidelines, an advertised request for proposals was published in the New York State Contract Reporter, and advertisements were transmitted to MWBE consultants certified to perform the services. 14 firms indicated their interest, and 8 firms submitted technical and cost proposals by the requisite deadline. An evaluation committee comprised of trust staff reviewed the submissions, evaluating each firm for responsiveness. The trust interviewed the 3 highest-ranking firms based upon the trust review of the technical proposals: Langen Engineering, Moffitt & Nickel, and Muser Rutledge Consulting Engineers. Following the firm's presentations, the trust evaluation committee awarded Musa the highest score based on its extensive background and qualifications in performing particularly pile restoration and replacement work as required for the Pier 66A component of the project. And the second highest score is awarded to M&M. Prior to the trust's final selection of a recommended marine engineer, it was determined that the condition of the float bridge was more fragile than originally determined, and that the pile remediation work at Pier 66A was urgent and of an emergency nature. Pursuant to the terms of the RFP, the trust may elect to award contract work to more than one respondent. Accordingly, staff determined it was necessary to divide the work into two segments based on the exigent condition of Pier 66A. The Pier 66A emergency remediation work would be performed as soon as possible, and the remaining engineering for the construction of a platform between Piers 98 and 99, and the engineering for repairs at Pier 45, 46, 51, 95, and 96 would be assessed separately. Musa proposed the lump sum price of $144,341.76 for the Pier 66A services. Accordingly, the trust determined that Musa presented the best value to the trust. In addition to the foregoing fee and cost estimate, soil boring estimates testing was also required in advance of the engineering work. The total estimated cost of the soil borings is $175,000, resulting in a total cost for the project of approximately $319,342. Test boring work will proceed under the direction of and subcontracted by Musa, the same as what's being done currently at the Morton Street bulkhead. Pricing and selection of a soil boring firm will be conducted on a competitive basis and approved by the trust board. Funding for this contract is currently available through the trust-approved capital maintenance budget. While the original procurement was through a competitive RFP, the contract to Musa is being awarded on an emergency basis. The trust seeks board authorization to enter into an emergency contract with Musa Rutledge Consulting Engineers for Pier 66A, emergency repair of crypt beams and piles, and related soil boring testing in the amount of $319,342, plus a 10% allowance for a total board authorization amount of up to $352,000. I'm sure you have questions.
Any questions? Comments? What is 66A?
That's where the Pier 66A Maritime Restaurant frying pan is.
It's the wood
It's the
float
float bridge.
that
It's the
attaches to the bar.
it's a historic B&O Railroad float bridge.
So where is their soil for? You're talking about piles.
Right down into the right.
I took you back to ground zero. How did this all come about?
In our park-wide marine inspections.
When did it come up first?
This,
Yeah, this one,
just recently,
just recently.
yes.
We found out about it like,
Well, we got the report a couple of months ago, and then by the time that a lot of us really looked at it and spent some time asking questions, we realized that it was of an emergency nature. But this is all recent. Now, just to give you a little history, when State DOT handed this piece of property over to us, they had repaired the piles on the eastern portion of the float bridge, not the western portion. It's the western portion that is now degraded.
we have our own expert who reviews this,
Yes, Steve Ferker.
and that's by contract.
I'm sorry?
Is he on staff? Or
Yes,
not?
he's on staff. We have a marine engineer. He's been here for 18 years.
So,
He knows the park blindfolded.
Other questions or comments?
I mean, I love, you gotta do what you gotta do. I love this thing. I mean, I think I've typed Torito, shipworm, and marine horror since like whatever that was, 1992 or something, into resolutions. But I am confused about the soil thing because isn't the float bridge floating, like it's
No,
attached
but
to the?
if you put new piles and you have to hammer in piles into the mud.
Oh,
So
you
we need
mean
to
on
test.
the bulkhead side?
No, just in the water.
Oh, so it has piles underneath it?
Yes, we're gonna have to drive, we're gonna have to underpin and likely drive piles.
Gotcha.
Can I just add that the float bridge actually isn't floating? Since
that-
the time of the DOT repairs, they fixed it in a stable position.
That's
not on
the part I
temperature
didn't get.
that used to be there when ships were regularly coming in.
So it's the float bridge.
Hence the float part, that's.
The historic float bridge,
Right.
not floating,
The once float.
right.
Bridge.
For the Atlantic
I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
Are the soil borings really like geotech? Like,
Yes.
Right, so that we did the same thing with the Morton Street bulkhead. We had our repairs changed when we did the soil testing, the type of equipment used.
Are we ready for a vote? Ready? Do I have a motion?
oh wait,
to-
can I, sorry, one more question. So as a result of the soil boring / geotech, is there gonna be more work that's gonna be required? Like, so what,
I think it's really about the equipment that's being used. I mean, but we'll see, we'll see what they come up with. Yes, Dan?
This is for the design only.
okay,
There'll be a following item for the actual repair.
This is just for the engineering, right? This is so they can do their drawings. It's not yet ready for your prime time.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, the next item for the board is a request for authorization to contract with M&N Engineering for Pier 9899, Marine Platform Engineer of Record Services. Ms. Wells.
Purpose of the platform project between Piers 98 and 99 is to create a widened esplanade in the northern section of the park where it can eventually be connected to Riverside Park South north of 59th Street. The marine repair projects result from the completion of the first phase of park-wide marine inspection services conducted earlier this year, which is separate than the Pier 98 and 99 platform. The inspections identified minor cracks, spalls, and voids in the concrete structures at Piers 45, 46, 51, 95, and 96, all of which will require capital maintenance to extend their useful service lives. This is not extensive work, not like what we just were talking about, but this is going to be typical capital maintenance that's going to, now be forever in the park. Park-wide marine inspection services were performed by Moffett and Nickel Engineering. As stated earlier, an advertised request for proposals was published in the New York State Contract Reporter, and advertisements went to FWBE Consultants. The trust interviewed the 3 highest-ranking firms, which we just talked about. And since it was determined to be necessary to divide the work into 2 segments based upon the exigent condition of Pier 66A, the remaining engineering addressed in the RFP for Piers 98 and 99 and the capital maintenance repairs for Piers 45, 46, 51, 95, and 96 were assessed separately. The user submitted a lump sum combined total price for this work of $577,371. M&M submitted a lump sum combined price for these 2 projects at $347,645. Because Muser's cost proposal was substantially higher for these 2 components of the overall work, the trust determined that M&M best satisfied the RFP's evaluative criteria, and they offered a fee and cost proposal that was both fair and reasonable, and thus presented the best value to the trust. Funding for this contract is currently available through the trust-approved capital budget, and with funds that may be available from the state of New York. The trust seeks board authorization to contract with M&M Engineering for Piers 98, 99 Marine Platform Engineering. This is just the engineering services in the amount of $347,645 plus a 10% allowance for total board authorization of $383,000.
This is between 98 and 99?
Yes, this will extend over the water to create a water plant,
South
esplanade.
of 98, it's already wider.
No, so, we have a little bit of an issue at the Con Ed pier because they have some of their facilities right on the bulkhead. But this is separate from the Esplanade at Pier 97.
And what the transfer station at 99, what's that? What is that?
Staying,
No, what does that use?
supposed to be newspaper.
Is it newspaper, it's paper recycling.
It's what it's supposed to be used for, yes.
Questions? Okay. Is there a motion to,
I guess I don't completely understand this, I feel a little dumb. So we got one combined bid, and we got one distinct bid.
No, we had one bid that was broken out into these different projects. We separated out the project that needed to be done on an emergency basis so we could do that quickly, more quickly. And we will go ahead and give the other two projects, which can go not as fast-paced as the first one, to the other bidder who bid lower on those two particular projects. We felt Bucer was best qualified and actually did have, oddly enough, the lowest price on the more complicated project. So that's who we thought was best to go with.
anybody else?
There are these other peers, I think, so 45, 46, 51, 95, 96,
Can you put the mic closer to you?
these other
Yes.
peers mentioned 45,
Yes.
46, that's coming separately. That
No,
would be-
so
or that's-
this would approve doing the engineering for those repairs. And then we will come back, once that engineering is done, we'll come back with what kind of, some of these repairs are very small. Some of them may take some, pile wrapping. It's unknown at this moment exactly what the work is. Some of it is maybe just
But it-
epoxy, filled.
So this is not just 98, 99, this is also.
Yes, it's
little things
also
that-
45, it's those repairs as well.
It's repairs or it's an expansion of the platform?
So there's two projects. One is to engineer a new platform, which will be part of the Esplanade, and to do separately repairs on those piers, 45, 46, 51, 96.
All in this one contract?
Yes, right.
So
So it's just engineering for it, it's not to
It's just
construct.
engineering. Mhm.
I'm having trouble understanding the incremental benefit of the Esplanade expansion between 98 and 99 if the Con Ed facility goes right up to the current agreement we have. Like, it just seems like it'd be a landlocked piece. So is there something more to it, or?
Well, we had sanitation move their gate back so that we could take the Esplanade to Riverside South through the eastern part of the pier of 99. I think we have to see whether we can address anything with Con Ed in terms of trying to facilitate them, maybe reorienting their equipment there.
Sanitation north, it'll be open.
Right, so right now, it doesn't really connect to Riverside South in a cohesive way. We'd like to look at that soon, and because it's a little dangerous up there, so we'd like to try to work that out sooner rather than later, how it connects to Riverside South safely.
And then the next project is the passenger ship terminal.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hate that you can't walk through there. There's a lot of bulkhead, you should be on the river there, you shouldn't be on the concrete. security barrier. Aptly named.
You're right.
Now, I know, I'm sorry.
Are we ready for a vote? Do I have a motion to approve the contract with Evident and continue?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. The next item before the board is a request for authorization to purchase replacement utility vehicles from Store Tractor Company. Ms. Wilson.
The attack that occurred on October 31st prompted New York State Department of Transportation, which owns the bike path, and NYPD counterterrorism to immediately place temporary security barriers on and adjacent to the bike path and at other locations within the park. Although we were successful in maintaining a 60-inch opening between the barricades, allowing for golf carts and small toros, those are our small maintenance vehicles, to fit through, the spacing of these security barriers prevents access to the bike path and the park by larger maintenance vehicles. Eventually, State DOT will replace these temporary barriers with permanent bollards, but the 60-inch opening will remain. Trust staff and Park Enforcement Patrol traverse the bike path and other access routes within the park for maintenance, security, and other activities necessary for operations for the park. Since most of the Trust's current fleet of maintenance and security vehicles will not pass through the temporary or future new bollard system, new equipment must be purchased in order to continue maintaining the park. This has been very intense conversations, and there's been many of them. I just will tell you that initially they wanted to create 48-inch, that's the standard, and we had to fight hard to get the 60 inches. Trust staff has identified new narrow-bodied vehicles manufactured by Toro that will be able to navigate the new security barrier constraint. The Trust proposes to purchase 11 such vehicles to replace the Trust's existing diesel work vehicle fleet, 4 vehicles to be used to supplement the PEP security vehicles, and 4 vehicles fitted with treads and provided with snow plows and snow blowers to facilitate the removal of snow from the bike path of the park. The utility vehicles needed by the Trust would be purchased under New York State OGS contract through Store Tractor Company, an authorized distributor of Toro vehicles and equipment. Store Tractor has offered a total price of $448,449.77 for the 19 vehicles requested, which is significantly discounted from the list price of $561,761.26. The Trust requests board authorization to purchase replacement utility vehicles from Store Tractor Company in an amount up to $450,000.
Thank you.
This is unfortunate and necessary.
These security barriers, they're not made in such a way that they can be removable or collapsible again coming through.
So, we're working very closely and cooperatively. It's a cooperative relationship with NYPD counterterrorism and state DOT to make sure that we get movable bollards where we need them. Unlikely that they'll be retractable bollards for a number of reasons. There's an enormous amount of utilities under the bikeway, and it's got water mains, it's got every utility, so you cannot go really past 4 feet, and likely less than 4 feet, maybe only 2 feet at the most. So very unlikely there'll be retractable bollards, but very likely there'll be removable bollards, which will take up to 2 people to move, but not easy, and this is going to, majorly slow down response time for any emergency. But this is the life that we lead right now. I'm hoping that we can find a way to make some of this attractive at some point. We've had some conversations with the NARC Foundation that might try to work with us on, would like to work with us on that. And it's likely that we're going to also have to put a few permanent bollards in the park at certain points. But we won't make that decision until we see the first tranche of state DOT permanent bollards. And then we'll make a determination where we think we might need some additional bollards.
When you say permanent, those are ones that even the 2 people, I mean, those are actually permanent, even the 2 people, they can't be removed.
2 people can remove a movable bollard.
Okay.
Yeah. The bollards have to have a certain crash rating dependent upon what's determined by the police department in terms of how fast the speed of a car or truck can go at a certain point. So every bollard is going to be examined differently in terms of, crash capacity. So it's not a pleasant task, but it's one we're spending a lot of time on. And like I said, at least it's being done with us at the table. So, as long as we have a seat and they're listening to us, we'll do the best we can.
The new vehicles, they're electric.
No, unfortunately, the new Toros will be gas. We don't like that, but we don't have choice. That's the only,
They're the only ones that are that size.
it's the only ones that are that size.
They just don't make electric
No.
vehicles that are that size.
No, nor diesel. No.
Where do you have to go to
That's really
fill up?
unfortunate.
We're gonna have to create a little gas station.
You are, right, because there's no gas.
What do you do with the old vehicles?
I don't know, what are we doing with the old vehicles?
We're selling.
Why you want one?
I'm just curious.
I mean, we're keeping up with them and sell the rest.
Parks and things. Like there's a lot of vehicles. There's some net value.
Part of surplus.
Yeah. Right.
Leslie, did you have a question? You look like you have a question.
I'm just curious about the Korea gas station.
Well, we have to fill,
Right,
it's not a real gas station, but we will have a gas place that they can fill the tanks.
and is it too early to know where you plan on storing all that gas?
Dan?
It's likely to be on the mezzanine. We don't want, we're not the ground.
We have a trust, on the mezzanine, we have a trust stores their vehicles.
We have a garage.
You know, when you come to our office, it's through the doors that are locked, authorized personnel only.
So you have regular fuel delivery?
I assume we'll have regular fuel deliveries. I don't, we haven't really gone into that.
That ramp, they're gonna really be honking as they come up the ramp.
There's absolutely no electric storage.
We couldn't find any. We looked. This is not something we want to do, but we couldn't find anything. That's below 60 inches wide.
Can you lease or rent these vehicles until they find
The leasing was as expensive as the buying. The way they do it is they lease it to you for a couple of years towards your purchase price. It's actually more expensive. It doesn't work that way. We looked into that.
What's the lifespan?
I'm sorry?
What's the lifespan of one of these vehicles?
No, Dan? Step here.
Well,
Bill, here you are.
historically, based on our diesel vehicles, which these probably won't be as durable, we get 10 years out of the diesels.
Why won't they be as durable?
Well, gasoline engines generally are not as durable as diesel
Okay.
engines. The rest of the body will be comparable. In fact, they've come up with some new designs. One of the problems that we have with the old Toros is with the suspension. They've redesigned the suspension, which is much more robust. So from that perspective, they should have a longer life expectancy. The engine probably won't have as much of a life expectancy. So I would estimate 10 years.
All our vehicles now are electric or no?
No, they're primarily.
Not the Toros. The Toros are diesel, the golf carts are electric.
All right, I didn't stop, so where do you fill the Toros?
We have a tank mounted on one of our pickup trucks that we take to the fields of the local service station, local diesel fuel, and use that for fueling the vehicles.
So you could do something similar to
We'll
that.
do something similar to that on a temporary basis, but we prefer to have a more permanent storage solution and have it on a truck. So the truck will be a temporary solution.
You said this would not be as interesting as the art.
I'm sorry?
You said this would not be as interesting as if it
Yeah.
happens, you were wrong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but this is also a can of mollusks.
But I take it we're confident that when the permanent bollards come with this, but you're comfortable enough buying the stuff now in advance of the permanent bollards?
Yes, we have, we feel satisfied that they're not going, counterterrorism and state DOT are going to, continue to work with us. And they're aware that we have to buy new equipment.
But you could put it on.
No, we can't get through now.
Oh, with the Jersey
Yeah.
barriers, right, gotcha.
They pay for the bollards, I assume.
They're paying for the bollards, yeah.
So, go on record saying we all really need this.
Is there any,
Yeah, we can.
that can,
I'm sorry?
help us with the costs of the
I've asked the borough president to see if she has any money left in her current budget. But if anybody has any good ideas, we're open. Because we can't use it for next year's budget. We have to buy it now, so we need money now.
Since NYP is proposing this, how do they respond to emergencies when there are bollards everywhere?
It's going to be, it's a very good question, and it's one that FDNY was in, and they said they'll just walk out to the pier. I mean, so, it's a very good question, and I honestly cannot really answer you on this. We're trying to keep access to certain, east-west access points open, or at least, but you'll have to remove a bollard in order to get through. And it's going to slow emergency times. If there's an emergency out on the pier, it's going to slow emergency time. That's just, everybody knows that. Yes?
There's another board item, barriers.
Yeah, they're still discussing this. Yeah. It's not great, but it is what it is. Yeah.
But we don't have a lot of choice, unfortunately. And I think the trust has actually done a very good job making it less worse than it could have been. Let's just put it that way. Any other comments? Are you ready for a vote?
Yes.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, the next item before the board is a request for authorization to contract with Workshop Art Fabrication LLC for fabrication of custom artwork for the LGBT memorial as well.
Thank you.
Somebody needs to repeat the vote. Would that be?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. At its September 28th, 2017 meeting, the board authorized the trust to enter into a $400,000 contract with Workshop Art Fabrication LLC for the fabrication of an LGBT memorial to be located in the Greenwich Village section of Hudson River Park. The trust has been working closely with New York State Parks with respect to the coordination of the procurement process for the memorial. State Parks and the trust will each hold several contracts associated with the project, with the funding for each provided through separate, dedicated New York State allowances. Prior to the execution of the contract between the trust and Workshop for the fabrication work, State Parks and Workshop indicated that the costs associated with the scope of work will be more than the original estimates, and requested that the contract amount be increased to $465,000. At the request of State Parks and with funding to be provided by New York State, the trust proposes to enter into a contract with workshop for the fabrication of a monument for the increased contract amount of $465,000. As set forth at the September 28, 2017 meeting, the trust has concluded that the proposed contract satisfies the trust's single source procurement criteria. The trust recommends proceeding with workshop for fabrication of the LGBT memorial and the board authorization amount of up to $465,000. Funding for the proposed contract will come from the state of New York. The trust requests board authorization to contract with Workshop of Art Fabrication LLC for fabrication of custom artwork for the LGBT memorial with board authorization of up to $465,000.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
We never got a presentation on that one.
Do we know?
Actually, we did have a presentation and only one board member showed up, and I'm sorry if somehow, I don't know how that worked, but happy to, I think I did show it to you at a board meeting. Didn't I do that?
I don't have an image of it, but I might not have been here. It might have been over the summer.
Okay, it hasn't changed, but I'll send it around. Okay? I'll send it around.
Don't worry.
Any questions or comments? No, there's a question. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion approved. Thank you. The next item before the board is a request for authorization. The next item before the board is a request for authorization to amend the contract with the New York State Office of General Services for Pier 55 code compliance review services.
Thank you. The design for the newly reconstructed Pier 54 called Pier 55 includes an open-air undercroft to provide backstage areas for actors, scenery, props, ADA access to the amphitheater, and additionally, the pier design includes several small enclosed spaces for dressing rooms, telecom, electric rooms, etc. And bathrooms. As a reminder, the inclusion of these enclosed spaces requires the trust to secure occupancy permits for the use of these facilities, and it was determined at that time, a couple of years ago, that New York State Office of General Services was best able to provide the services the Pier 55 project in a thorough and timely manner. In accordance with the trust procurement guidelines, the trust may utilize centralized contracting process outlined earlier to take advantage of streamlined government bulk contracting process. As in its September 29, 2015 meeting, the board approved a 3-year contract with OGS ending May 31st, 2018 for the Pier 55 services in an amount up to $347,050. For the period ending September 30th, 2017, OGS has billed the trust a total amount of $345,891.56 for OGS services related to the work for Pier 55 piles, and for the permitting, I should say. Additional funding is now required to continue the OGS services related to the Pier 55 closed structures. OGS's scope of work for the Pier 55 project encompasses a comprehensive review of all construction documents to confirm the New York State Building Code compliance and periodic construction inspections throughout the work period. OGS will issue a certificate of code compliance for the project at the end of the process. As is the case with other government agencies using its services, OGS charges a fee for its services, which are largely outsourced to third-party consultants. Trust staff has estimated that additional funding in the amount of $150,000 is required to complete the remaining phases of the OGS services to final construction. The OGS services may be funded from the trust's reserve account. 50% of these costs will be reimbursed by Pier 55. The trust requests board authorization to amend the contract with OGS for Pier 55 code compliance review services in an amount of up to $150,000 with a reserve for a total board authorization amount of $497.50. Questions?
Questions?
sorry?
I'm a little lost, like 55.
I'm sorry?
This is for 55.
Yeah. What are you lost about? Sorry.
I'm lost that, if it's ongoing or not.
Could you put the mic
Okay,
towards you?
I'm lost in, with this talking about going forward with the project.
Yes.
I'm lost.
Well, we have an executive session, but the project is moving forward.
Okay.
And you need this stuff before it's even built.
Yeah.
'Cause
So
it's all
the
designed.
project is ramping up again. We met with the executive director of OGS last week to discuss the fact that they have basically they're charging more than their original estimates, and we want to get a handle on what this is going forward. We have the project is fully permitted, but what happens is they send out inspectors for some of our inspections. And we are working out a schedule with them of what inspections that they'll continue to want to consult on. And then they have to go at the final part of the project, just as if DOB would do a final inspection. So these monies are not going to be spent like today. This is for the project as it would move forward.
No, that makes sense. I just didn't know the project was moving forward.
We're going to talk about this more in our executive session. Yeah.
Why is this 50/50, not 100%?
It was always,
Is that always-
at the beginning, was always part of what we called the approval expenses, in which we would share them 50/50 with Pier 55.
Any other questions or comments? None, do I have a motion to approve this? Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries, thank you. All right, and we've all been looking forward to this next item. Coming before the board, which is a request for authorization to enter into emergency contract for the purchase of mobile crash barriers and gates, as well as
Trust staff contractors, PEP, FDNY, EMS, NYPD, relies on several access points from Route 9A, Tension Park for maintenance, security, construction, etc. within the park in order to prevent additional barricades from being placed on park property. Trust staff is looking into purchasing gates and movable barriers to augment and also replace some state DOT and NYPD temporary barricades in the crosswalks and the park. They're blocking access in some of the Esplanade areas right now. These mobile barriers and gates would be placed at key locations within the park and would be opened only to allow authorized vehicles to gain access to the park. Being portable, these barriers would be relocated should the need arise and may be incorporated into the permanent barrier plan when implemented. This procurement is considered an emergency as these barriers and gates will allow the trust and utility companies to upkeep and repair public resources, which has been hampered by the replacement of temporary barricades in certain areas of the park. The new barriers will be the type that have been previously used by NYPD counterterrorism, as public safety is of utmost importance to us. Under the trust procurement guidelines, an emergency procurement is one in which urgent and unexpected situation occurs where health and public safety or the conservation of public resources is at risk. The trust may issue contracts without complying with formal competitive procurement requirements in the event of an emergency. However, the trust shall make a reasonable attempt to obtain at least 3 quotes for each such emergency procurement. The trust will endeavor to secure, I already said that. We will look for competitive pricing for these gates and crash barriers, and if possible, purchase them through OGS or GSA. The estimated purchase price for 6 crash barriers and/or gates will not exceed $250,000. Funding for these purchases is currently available through the trust-approved operating budget. The trust requests board authorization to purchase competitively priced mobile crash barriers and gates as needed from qualified vendors for a total board authorization not to exceed of $250,000.
Why isn't the city paying for these?
Because, well, I can't answer that question, why the city isn't paying, but what I can say is they have put, NYPD has put blocks on our esplanade in certain areas. And as far as they're concerned, they just have to stay. The only reason they can be moved is if we purchase one of these gates that can be opened by trust vehicles on the east-west side of some of the pedestrian walks like Canal Street. So we can have NYPD then remove those blocks. So they don't have an impetus to move those blocks. If we want them moved so we can maintain the clock of the park, we have to purchase some of these movable gates and barriers so that we can access the rest of the esplanade. If we can get the city to pay for some of this, or the state to pay for some of this, that's great, and we're trying, but can't wait to find out if somebody else is gonna pay for it.
The whole thing's making me tired. I actually don't agree that all these bollards and all this, that public safety is paramount, but let's discuss whether public safety is actually being protected by all these barriers.
Yeah, I agree with Pam.
I mean, it's tiring.
Yeah, I would like to know that we have I feel better if I felt like we had our own traffic designer take a look at what we need for safety and make our own recommendations as to safety. And safety is incredibly important, we know, not a question. But I would like somebody from our team to look at it in terms of aesthetics and cost, because I'm with Pam, I'm getting tired.
Yeah, but you don't want to spend a lot of time, analyzing this while another accident could or a terrorist attack could actually be on the way. You need to do something immediately to sort of address the open issues and then sort of worry about this, because there's a whole liability issue here. I mean, if you spend a couple months analyzing this, it could be an issue.
Yeah, but you know what, my whole problem with this from the very beginning has been, okay, so what if this didn't happen and that's River Park? What if it happened in Brooklyn Bridge Park? Is Brooklyn Bridge Park putting up bollards? Is Central Park putting up bollards? Are there bollards all over the city so that nobody can drive anywhere?
But on
Because
a sidewalk.
it's going to happen. So why aren't we working more on preventing it from happening in the first place?
We agree with
Because
that,
we
but
can't prevent it.
the problem,
So-
sorry.
This is, I think, my understanding is, this is a little bit out of our hands at this
Yes.
point, unfortunately. And actually, my question is, what would happen if we didn't approve any of this?
Then NYPD will keep their security barriers
Exactly.
on our esplanade, and we won't be able to access points in the park.
Right.
And look
So
at
we're
DC,
in
it took-
between a rock and a hard place.
And look at DC, it took time in DC to get all these, in place, and, they've done a nice job with it, but, it's still a necessary
Yeah,
thing
right,
to do,
exactly.
to work on
There's
it.
barriers in place now. I mean, there are barriers in place now.
Correct.
We want to get our own look at them. I agree, we don't have all the time in the world to do this, but we have some time, we could hire
And the problem
somebody.
is though, that there are barriers there now that don't work for us. And if we want them to be removed, if I understand this
That's right.
correctly, if we want them to be removed and something put there that does work better for us, then we have to do this.
Right.
So-
Dan, did you want to say
Yeah,
something?
Larry, these are temporary movable barriers only intended to be in place until a permanent solution is developed. But as the chair indicates, we need a solution immediately in order to service the park. They satisfy the security concerns of the agencies. So they're to be dealt with.
Why is it okay with the city? Why is the NYPD only, like emergency vehicles, fire, it seems like it should be okay with the other agencies of the city if you can't
Well, so State Homeland Security and NYPD counterterrorism trump anybody else in these situations. So we are working with them, with all the DOTs, but particularly with state DOT, because the bikeway is their property. The park property is our property. But if they block the bikeway in a way we can't get into our property, we got a problem. So, and we are not going to be able to tell them that they can't put barriers on their property. It's not pleasant for us, but we have, I can't tell you how many hours since October 31st, we have sat in meetings with 20, 30, 40 people at a table. Caitlin came to one of them. We are working through issues. I mean, immediately they started dropping them at 36, 48 inches. We couldn't get anything through them. We are working through these situations with them as best as we can to have them and moving forward with permanent bollards, making a passionate case for remembering that this is a park and not this is a quote from me, the Cross Bronx Expressway. So, but right at this moment, we cannot get to certain parts of the park. So the only way we will get to them and have NYPD and State DOT remove some of their temporary barriers is to be able to get some of these temporary gates and crash barriers that we will place where we think they should be placed so that we can get those big blocks off of our esplanade. There's no other choice here. I mean, you can say no to this, but then all you're saying is that NYPD and State DOT will keep all their material in place. So.
And what's the timing on the permanent plan?
The plan, we're supposed to get the first look at thoughts tomorrow. So they're moving very, very quickly. They're planning on starting to put footings in probably, if it's warm over the winter, March, whenever. They're moving very quickly. They want to actually have a full bollard system in before the season. So whether they can do that or not, I'm not sure, but they seem to think they can. It's going to be iterative. It's not going to be dropped all at once like these. They'll be digging and putting footings and moving on.
Well, I assume we're going to go and approve this, and I will vote for it when the motion is put on the floor. But at the same time, I would like us to get our own design opinion, and take our own look at it, and have our own set of plans done. I think it would be a worthwhile expense.
I'm sorry, to have a plan done in the park or a plan done for New York State DOT?
No, that's for us to do a plan for the park.
For the park, okay.
For the park.
Fine.
We have a plan that you and the people in the park and we agree on, which will be both safe, number one, and maybe a bit usable for our premises, and maybe a touch aesthetically pleasing. But for us.
That's on our property, that's just fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, with that,
I think that the board would agree to spend a little money to do that.
You mean for places not along the bike path?
For our park.
In any place that we might need it on an esplanade because it's too wide. And if there's too wide an opening on an esplanade, we will have to put something there to prevent someone driving on the esplanade.
But it should be part of the overall risk assessment anyway for the park. It's not necessarily something separate.
It's going to be a good story until someone doesn't get rescued or until someone hurts themselves on the bollard. I just have to say, so TA got all those, I love transportation alternatives, like I'm always on their side. But they got all those quotes about putting, you guys, Hudson River Park should have put bollards in sooner. And then as soon as they dropped those Jersey barriers, I got a call from a board member of TA saying, why did you put these giant Jersey barriers down there, James? So decide which way you want it.
Right.
We're going to talk a little bit more about this in executive session, by
Yay.
the way.
So
We're going to have a lot more fun with this.
Stay tuned. Do I have a motion? Thank you. Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right.
And then this next one tickles John Halpern's fancy, I know.
Okay, so that next item before the board is a request for authorization to contract with PFM Asset Management LLC for investment advisory services. Ms. Wells.
Thank you. To strengthen its investment program, the trust seeks the services of an experienced financial advisor to help maximize income in accordance with approved trust investment guidelines. We've been talking about this for a number of years. Presently, the trust has restricted and unrestricted funds in excess of $160 million placed in fully collateralized Capital One Bank money market accounts earning approximately 55 basis points. The bulk of the trust funds, approximately $134 million, are restricted funds. Additional restricted funds may be forthcoming from prospective sale of transferable development rights, now the subject of 2 MOUs for projects recently certified into ULIP, which you'll hear more about. After reviewing several options, it was determined that hiring an investment advisor will provide the best value for the trust. An investment advisor will create a customized and diversified asset allocation designed to meet return objectives, liquidity requirements, and investment horizon and risk tolerance preferences. Trust staff researched several investment advising services and has identified PFM Asset Management as an experienced and qualified entity which may be procured using a type of contract option called piggybacking. PFM staff has met with members of the board's Finance and Investment Committee, chaired by Director Kaplan, to review their qualifications and approach to the proposed assignment. PFM is one of the largest and most established public sector investment advisory groups. As of June 30th, 2017, PFM had $77.5 billion in discretionary assets under management and $42.1 billion in assets under advisement. Representative New York State clients include Battery Park City Authority, Long Island Power Authority, and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. New York State Finance Law 16310E permits the trust to piggyback on an existing contract awarded by another department, agency, or instrumentality of any state as long as the trust determines there is a need for the product. The procurement method used by the other agency is substantially similar to the trust, and no New York State OGS centralized contract action is available. A competitive bidding process is not an optimal method of selecting a vendor, and the cost is reasonable. The trust has examined the Battery Park City Authority procurement and contract with PFM and ascertained that all of the above criteria have been met, and the trust may piggyback on the competitively procured PCA contract. The pricing for the PFM contract will not be greater than what BPCA is currently paying, which is an annual fee of 8 basis points, 0.08, of the previous month's average assets under management. In addition, PFM will hire a subcontractor to meet the MWBE goal as defined in their contract with Battery Park City. The trust requests board authorization to enter into a 4-year contract with PFM Asset Management for investment advising services for a total board authorization of up to $500,000. Jeff, do you want to say anything about that?
I think you said.
Okay.
Questions or comments?
Well, this is the recommendation of our finance.
Yes.
Correct.
It is. We sat through,
Riveting.
thank you, riveting, thank you.
We sat through a riveting presentation. Yes.
Great. And yes, we do recommend this to the board. Anybody else, questions or comments? We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Todd. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and the last thing on our formal agenda is a request for the appointment of Carl Weisbrod as a member of the board's committees for finance and investment and governance. Ms. Wells.
Thank you. Trust Board has several working committees that help facilitate trust business between board meetings, and which serve as an invaluable source of experience and wisdom for staff. This year, one of our directors, Joe Rose, ended his service on the board on November 2nd, 2017. Mayor de Blasio appointed our newest director, Carl Weisbrod. Carl has indicated a willingness to serve on board committees, and staff today is recommending his appointment to 2 committees, Finance and Investment and Governance. Director Weisbrod's vast understanding of public-private partnerships and government will add value to these committees. Trust staff now recommends the appointment of Director Weisbrod to the Finance and Investment and Governance committees.
Thank you. This one should be easy, hopefully. Any questions or comments? Do I have a motion? Thank you. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Great. Okay, that completes our board action items for today, and now I'd like to ask Ms. Wells to give the governance report.
Thank you. Also in your packets is the mid-year financial report to the board, which reflects the completions of a trust second quarter ending September 30th. The first 6 months yielded total operating revenues of $15.8 million, which is 8% or $2.1 million greater than the mid-year budget. Operating expenses are $9.7 million or on budget. However, capital maintenance and new equipment purchases are only $1.5 million or $1.5 million under mid-year budget. As described earlier, though, we anticipate an equipment expenditure net of the reimbursables of $700,000 for vehicles, cameras, and crash barriers and gates. However, some capital maintenance projects have experienced some difficulties and some slowdowns, and the repair to the Pier 25 playground and Pier 45 pavers will be rescheduled for the fall. Any questions?
Have our tenants been paying us promptly?
I'm sorry?
Have our tenants been paying us promptly?
Frida, are the tenants paying us promptly?
Yes.
I think you have to define promptly.
We're much more on top of it than we ever were.
30 to 60 days.
We're still anguished and heartbroken over the attack on the bikeway during Halloween. Our hearts go out to all the injured and families of all the victims of this terrible terrorist attack. It hurts us all terribly that our beloved park was used to commit such a heinous act. And it is unfortunate that so many of Trust staff were witness to the aftermath. As you know, we make public safety a top priority. Even though the bikeway is on property owned and controlled by New York State DOT, we have always worked as collaborative neighbors with DOT to ensure safety when accessing the park and its surrounding property. Nobody could have predicted the events of October 31st, and we hope none of us will have to witness such a tragedy again in the future. I want to take a moment to thank the Trust staff, our PEP officers, as well as members of law enforcement who responded so quickly to help those who were injured at the scene. As you know, NYPD and State DOT, as we have discussed, have placed these temporary barricades, but we are working closely with them, and we will hire somebody for park property to work on permanent bollards. And State DOT will probably start implementing this early spring. But the one thing, I think I may have touched on it, we're also speaking to an arts organization about the possibility of decorating the bollards and turning them into an artistic expression, an opportunity to maybe have, turn this into something more optimistic. And we're only at the beginning of this exploration. I know Pam, you want to speak about this as well. And we'll keep you, this may be something that we can have, make this into a park moment. On Monday, the City Planning Commission certified into ULURP both the Douglaston and La Luzerne sites on Block 675 between 29th and 30th Streets. All of the documents pertaining to the Trust proposed air rights transactions, including the appraisals, MOUs, and proposed purchase and sale agreements, are posted on our website. This is because the MOU is the only document that is currently signed before certification. This is because it binds the developers to the payment and payout period and ensures the chair of the Department of City Planning that an agreement has been reached and documented, which DCP will rely on during the ULUP process. These documents have also been sent to Community Board 4 and local elected officials. I want to thank Deputy Mayor Glenn for her support, as well as board members Kaplan and Halpern, as well as Dan and Noreen for helping us to get to this point. As you recall from the air rights transfer from Pier 40 to 550 Washington Street, these transactions will go through the Trust Significant Action process. We will hold a public hearing at the same time as the City Planning Commission, and the board will not vote on the transactions until the completion of ULUP, which is expected to be the end of June of 2018. The proposed sale price for these transactions are $46,570,000. 20% is intended to go towards future capital maintenance projects, and approximately $37 million is intended to be used for capital projects, all in Community Board 4. The Trust is working with the Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee of Board 4 to finalize the list of projects these funds can be allocated towards. Any comments? So we are on our 7-month journey.